Hello adventurers, this is Bryant, your Dungeon Master, back with another Session 0 video for the Corvian Pale campaign. Today I'm going to talk a little bit about table rules and playstyle. First of all, let's talk about a few ground rules for everyone in the campaign. First, the players will be the ones who choose who hosts. Unlike a regular weekly campaign where you're meeting at the same place every week, in this case, the sessions are going to be scheduled by the players, and people will determine per session who's going to host. Usually it will be a player at their home, but sometimes it may be in a public location, especially a game store such as Labyrinth here in DC. I want to point out that there are a couple of rules, a couple of responsibilities on both sides of that equation. For the host, you just need to make sure that there's ample space for all of us to play, and it would be great if the space was clean when everybody got there, that kind of thing. For everyone else who's attending, it's the rule of being a guest in anyone's home. Be polite, be courteous, be mindful of roommates or small children, pets, anything like that may also be in the home. You don't want to be disturbing their routine more than we already are. And of course, make sure that we clean up after ourselves when we go so that we can be invited back. This goes doubly so if we're playing in a public place like a game store, because we don't want to be the gamers who are not invited back because we left a mess or we were really loud and rude to other people, that sort of thing. I don't anticipate this being a problem, but it's best to say it ahead of time. Always make sure that you're on time. If you can at all avoid being late, this is really, really important. Being early is actually better than being on time, just because sometimes, especially if we're playing in the evening after work, you're going to be on a limited schedule, and so we don't want to lose any time just because someone is running behind. Obviously, it does happen sometimes. Just please try to let everyone know if you're running late. Similarly, if you can't make a session, especially if you have a sudden family emergency, you get sick, something like that, let everyone know as soon as possible, preferably before the day of, and at the very least early in the day of if something happens. We may be playing with small groups at times, or you may have a really critical character. Maybe you're playing a cleric when we really need one because we're running up against undead that evening. People need to know so they can prepare accordingly, and in some cases we may have to cancel the session if there's not enough players. Regarding food and drink, with this, obviously the first rule is that you have to obey whatever the host says. Some game stores are fine with people bringing food and drinks in, some people are not. Some hosts may have particular preferences for what you bring into their house. We're going to be playing again after work some evening, so it totally makes sense if you want to bring in some food with you, whether that's your dinner, whether that's just some snacks. It's always a good idea to bring snacks to share, but that is not a requirement. I don't have any particular problem with people eating at the table during the game. It can be a little distracting, so if it's snacks, that's probably fine. If it's a meal, maybe we can go ahead and eat that before the session actually starts. We're all adults, so if you want to enjoy an adult beverage during the session, I don't particularly have a problem with that. I think just moderation is key. You don't want to drink so much that you're not able to fully participate and contribute. That also brings me to probably one of my personal pet peeves as a Dungeon Master. Just pay attention. I know I, for one, am personally very addicted to my phone and tend to check it way more often than I should, but I do my best to put it down during the game, and I really would like everyone else to do that. Don't be reading books, don't be having side conversations when something else important is going on. It really is important for everyone to pay attention and be invested in the game and in what's going on during that session. Another potential issue I'd like to go ahead and address is player versus player situations. It's not something that's ever been a real issue in any of my campaigns, but again, I think it's good to go ahead and address it up front. My ground rule is basically the victim of any such action has to agree, otherwise it doesn't succeed or it just doesn't happen. So there may be role-playing situations where you want to do something like this. Maybe one character's insulting another, leads to a fist fight or something like that. Maybe you have the stereotype from a long time where the rogue is going to take the best treasure out of everyone's backpacks during his watch at night. Any of that is allowed so long as the victim of the action agrees. If they don't agree, it doesn't happen. It either doesn't happen at all or it just fails. The last piece of this topic is metagaming. There are a lot of podcast episodes and blog entries and other things that you can read or listen to think about metagaming to get a better definition of it. Basically, I think there's a couple of parts to it. The main one is using out-of-character knowledge for in-character gain. A lot of times this might happen because you're really familiar with a certain kind of monster, and so even though your character has never encountered them before, you automatically act as if you know their weakness, something of that nature. So with that, don't do it. Don't engage in something where you're using out-of-character knowledge for your character where there's something that they wouldn't have any way of knowing how to do that. Another related piece of that is table talk, is a lot of out-of-character discussion at the table. Generally, I very strongly discourage this. I like for people to stay in character as much as possible. I think it's appropriate when you're planning, say, how you're going to break into a castle or approach a certain enemy, that you talk about it in character. There's no reason why that discussion can't be had in character. What that means as well is that if your character is scouting ahead or is otherwise not in the room, then you as a player cannot participate in that conversation unless you return to the room or have a magical means of communicating with the party or something of that nature. It's pretty simple, and it helps a lot with keeping things feeling realistic. And so it's just something that I like to enforce whenever possible. Now, as far as the play style of the campaign, the Dungeon Master's Guide lists 3 different play styles. There's hack and slash, there's immersive storytelling, and there's something in between. Hack and slash, of course, is a very combat-focused. You're not really worried about characterization or developing a story. You're just there to fight and to get loot and stuff of that nature. Immersive storytelling, on the other hand, is sort of the opposite end of that scale, where you're very concerned with telling stories, developing your character, following, very specific or detailed plots, and the rules are, if anything, are facilitating that, or they're left behind. This campaign is going to be the something in between. So there would definitely be rules. We would definitely be rolling dice. We will definitely be keeping track of things like your inventory, your encumbrance, how many of your arrows have you used, things of that nature. So it is a little bit gamist and a little bit more simulationist than some games. And there will be a narrative story, but the important difference here is that as the Dungeon Master in this campaign, I'm not really going to be laying plot hooks out in front of you. There is no mysterious old man in the tavern who's going to send you on a quest. It is going to be situations and locations that I put in front of you, and it's how your characters react to that, how they deal with the problems that they're facing. That's where the story comes from. And like other aspects of the campaign, it's going to be very dependent on the players to take that and run with it in whatever way they most want to. As far as the flavor of the campaign itself, I would say that it's more sword and sorcery versus heroic fantasy, epic fantasy, dark fantasy, that kind of thing. That's not to say that your character can't be heroic, it's to say they don't have to be heroic. A lot of the sword and sorcery characters, I think Conan is the prime example that always comes to mind for me. They are out for themselves to some degree. They're definitely out for adventure, for treasure, for rewards, things of that nature. And so it's, it's not a requirement by any means. Make whatever kind of character you want, but realize that that is a very acceptable kind of character to make in this scenario. And just in general, that is the flavor that I'm hoping to capture in the game. Finally, I want to talk a little bit more about the fact that this is a West Marches style campaign as I've described it. I talked about that a little bit in the last video. I've posted links to the Facebook group, and I just want to talk a little bit more about that. West Marches is a specific campaign style that was created by Ben Robbins about 10 years ago, and it's really become its own sort of subgenre within role-playing, especially with Dungeons and Dragons. And I think it's really great. I was really fascinated by it when I first read about it, and I wanted to give it a try, in part as a way to challenge myself and to make an interesting new campaign. I think that one of the main, most important facets of West Marches is that the players are in charge. The players decide where to go, what they want to do, when they want to play, and that sort of thing is really important in allowing the players to feel empowered. And so it's not me setting the schedule, it's not me sending reminders, hey everyone, we got to play this week, are you available? In this case, the players are in charge, and the players are the ones who have to coordinate that. Obviously you have to make sure that I'm available and that I'm on board, but barring that issue, it really is on the players. And so players who are engaged, who are proactive, and who are excited to play are the ones who are going to be successful and who are going to get the most out of the campaign. That said, this is also an open pool of players. This is an open table type of game. A lot of us have not played that type of game before, whereas normally you might have 4 or 5 people who get together every week, every 2 weeks, something of that nature. This is a case where of the people who are in the Facebook group, I think we've got somewhere around 10 who are local and who are going to be able to be active regularly. And so this is a case where you have to coordinate who's going to be able to show up at a session. There is a limit, usually 5, to how many players I can handle at a table, and that's good and challenging. It means that if everyone wants to play, someone has to sit out. However, it is really good for tackling the issues that a closed table normally has, where 1 or 2 people can't make it. Should we even play this week? Should we play without them? What do we do without this player whose character is really, really important for where we are in the storyline right now? That's not the case. In this kind of campaign, whoever shows up is going to be the one playing, and that can make for interesting situations. You may have all melee fighter type characters show up one week and no wizard, and you kind of have to figure out how to work around that shortcoming. But I think that one of the other benefits of this, as well as the players being in charge, is that as many of us are adults, we're working, many of us have partners, some have kids or pets, we have other commitments, we have busy lives, and sometimes it's things that we can't get around. Sometimes it's merely, well, there's a concert this weekend that I really want to go to, and I'd rather do that than play D&D this weekend. So in those cases, it doesn't mean that no one gets to play because one person is unavailable for something like that. Even if multiple people are unavailable, as long as one of those people is not me, the Dungeon Master, you're going to be able to still play. You should be able to find people who can get together at some point when you're ready to play. Another defining factor of this kind of campaign is that, as I mentioned before, there is no Dungeon Master driven narrative. There is no overall plot. There are no real plot hooks. There are situations, there are locations, and the player characters are all driven by the desire to explore. And so again, I think that opens up some really interesting experiences and opportunities where players are looking to create their own story, whatever that may be. The world is also very dangerous. That is another factor of a West Marches style campaign. It means that players have to be really creative, and they really have to gather information, act cautiously, think about how to solve problems, and weigh the risk versus reward, it may be worth it to them to go into a dungeon that they know is really dangerous, that is the lair of a really, powerful monster, because there may be a really great treasure inside of there that they want, or there may be some kind of information for a piece of a puzzle that they're trying to piece together. But ultimately, it's on the players, and that's one of the things about this world and the open table situation, is that your characters could die, and I think that adds a real interesting factor to it versus a lot of games, especially if it's story driven and you're the hero character. And your game master is going to be really hesitant to kill you because it's going to mess up all of his plans. That's not a factor here. And with that in mind, it also brings us to the point of how information sharing is really, really crucial. And so that is information that you learn about the world, the maps that you're drawing about the wilderness and about any dungeons you go into, any creatures that you encounter. This kind of information is what you want to share in your game recaps that you're going to be posting to the Facebook group, or at least that I hope you will be posting to the Facebook group, because it allows whoever wasn't playing to find out more about the world anyway. And this reflects what's going on in the tavern as the adventurers are coming back and they're having a drink, they're having dinner, and they're boasting about what heroic deeds they performed, or what treasure they brought home, or what narrow misses they had with some really dangerous creature. So I think that it's just really important to remember to share that information with other players. And that's going to wrap it up for this episode. Thanks for watching, and I'm looking forward to adventuring with all of you.